Speaking of choices,
Yeah.
your choice of music. Do you know what's the title of this song?
No, I don't.
Do you want to tell us the title of the song, Naz? Free your mind and your ass will follow.
I love it.
And what I'm loving about this show, Lina, is that because we do this, we ask our guests to send us their favorite song or the music of the moment or whatever comes to their mind. And it's so eclectic. I have an amazing playlist being compiled as we move forward of like two opposing ends, from classical Fairuz to chanting to this. We had Ayman who sent us Missy Elliott, really, really very, 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 very eclectic, and I'm loving it.
We have to do a playlist.
Yeah,
that would be so cool.
We're collating it into a playlist for the show.
Fantastic.
And it's great because each one, for me, what's special is each one is such a good starting point to seeing some different layer to that person. And starting from that, and that's where we usually start. Like, why this?
Why this?
Why this?
Why this? I think it was quite a pivotal moment growing up. I was telling you how music in my childhood was very controlled.
Yes.
So it was Kulthum, it was Fairuz, it was opera, jazz, and weirdly, what's her name? Working 9 to 5. Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton.
Oh, wow.
Good old Dolly.
I think it was something to do with Reader's Digest. We got a cassette and I just consumed those songs on my own in a room. They were like my guilty pleasure. And once I had my own, I guess, freedom, I consumed music so fast. It was like trying to understand. I think it's part of trying to understand who you are, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I was able, I guess, to free my mind and truly kind of express. Music is so emotive. Yeah. So it was a song that allowed me, you can think, you can dream however much you want. So that's why
you go places. You go places with music.
Yeah, you go places. Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the move your ass bit that follows.
Move your ass is like you get up and go. That's how I saw it.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't just dream.
It makes you move.
You don't just dream. You actually act upon it. So I think that was kind of a pivotal song for me.
Well, thank you for contributing to our playlist. We'll make sure that we'll distribute it. Once we wrap up whatever season we're gonna wrap up. Hello and welcome to Forward Moves, hosted by Lina Nahhas and Raja Haddad, a conversation with our guests about the path of their successful journey and what keeps them moving forward in an ever-changing environment. Hello, Nez Gebreel.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
Usually we do like an intro based on the bio that you shared, so I'll just jump into it now. For our listeners and viewers, Nez Gebreel is a prominent force in the fashion and design sector. And I'll stop here. That's it. I don't need to say anything more. That's
quite a big...
mic drop, Do I need to say anything more? No,
yes. Come on.
But okay, let's say some more. She notably served as the inaugural CEO of the Dubai Design and Fashion Council, the DDFC. Pivotal in positioning Dubai as an emerging design hub, her leadership saw the launch of Dubai Design Week. Nez's current consultancy business builds on her vast experience towards strategic development for global brands in fashion, entertainment, and media. She is also the co-founder of a podcast, Luxury Unedited, which is designed for devoted luxury enthusiasts, industry profiles, and the casual observers intrigued by the allure of luxury. I love that. I love that. She sits on a number of advisory boards, both regionally and globally, and most recently accepted the role of chairperson of the Industry Advisory Board at Heriot-Watt University in Dubai. And if this isn't impressive enough, Nez has been named by Harper's Bazaar Arabia as one of the 50 men and women who are shaping UAE's cultural future, nominated for the Emirates Women of the Year Awards, named as one of the UAE's 50 most inspirational women by Stylist magazine, and named on the power list by designer Mina as one of the 50 most influential creative professionals in the region. I feel we're going to have so much fun.
About the embarrassing, I think is from my end, I see it as inspiring, but you said it's been embarrassing.
Did she whisper that? In
yes.
Why is it embarrassing?
How is that? How did that land on you? I like to see what.
There's the professional me, and then there's the personal me. And actually, funny enough, I had a very full career before I came here. But one of my main objectives moving to the region was highlighting talent. You know, someone from the region. I was like, you know, I don't actually, apart from the few big, I don't know, like there must be a landscape of creatives. I sort of delved into that with a friend, Najla Al-Jaili. She has something called Noon Arts. And it was during the revolution for Libya. And we wanted to support Libyan artists. So she was kind enough to allow me the first few exhibitions to work with her, which we created. And I was like, you know, the creative language is so important.
It is.
And we have such a deep history of culture, philosophy, so much, and yet we seem to have forgotten it.
Yeah.
And I think with everything that's happened, particularly in the last few years, it's reawakening us. And we're, you know, I'm relearning history in many ways, but not just history in terms of politics, but in terms of, you know, what came from the region. In terms of, you know,
what shapes our identity.
What shapes our identity, absolutely. Yeah. You know, which was a big question if you grow up in a little village in the northwest of the UK. It's like you're not surrounded by other Arabs. So, yeah.
It's I love that, Naz, because it's something we often talk about, Lina and myself. You know, how can we make and we have different acronyms for that. How can we make Arab culture cool again? You know, so Micah. How can we make Arab identity cool again?
Yeah.
But it all revolves into what you're saying. How can we tell the story of the richness of talent of this region? And I don't think we tell it enough. I don't think that the narrative is finding its space or its place among the other competing narratives coming out from the region and about the region.
What I love about what you said, sorry, just for a second, just to reflect it back to you, is the reawakening. It's almost like it's there, but you're the one who's waking up to it. There's that reawakening going on.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think it's maybe a generational thing. And I think we were so apologetic about our heritage, not just, you know, Arabs had we were fed so much in the media, which was confusing because we knew who we were. And there was a certain silence, I think. And we felt that we should take on all the cultures that was around us. I've always felt very proudly Arab. That was never the thing, but that wasn't always necessarily the foremost, because I think identity is a particularly ingrained thing that necessarily that in the creative landscape, you don't need to express it in a very obvious way.
Is it because the misperception that it's, you know, art or creative expression is that identity by itself, by the creator?
Yeah, because we're very complex as human beings. Our influences, and within the creative world, you know, talent is influenced by everything. So again, just it's quite jarring when people are like, oh, you know, when they say you've taken that from that culture. I think that's the beauty of the creative world, that talent does take from each other. But I think we as a generation, I'm lumping you in with me.
Thank you.
Yes, that's great.
Makes me feel younger.
Yes. No, I'm sure I'm probably the oldest one in the room. But we weren't as good as expressing ourselves as the generations that are coming below. They're using ways of explaining their identity in a completely refreshing way, I think, and in an important way. And they're, you know, not that we've never been proud, but we were much more apologetic in terms of sharing what we do and our knowledge. Perhaps this is,
this may have led maybe to some form of complacency about, how we express out by acquiring, different identities. We became complacent about living and celebrating our own.
Yeah, perhaps. But I know from, in terms of my personal experience of being, Arab diaspora and an immigrant, it wasn't necessarily about sharing it was about survival.
Yeah.
So it was about integrating, feeling comfortable, making it your home.
Yeah.
And hard work. So once that our sort of parents' generation and our generation been through that, I think the generations that came, it was much freer for them.
Yes.
It was much, I wouldn't say easier, but we gave them the platform.
The path was paved. I think for me personally, I really resonate with the reawakening, because I'm like you. I grew up in Canada. I was proudly Arab as well. I even created the Arab Student Association at university, but I didn't quite own it. It was more like, well, I just want to tell the story for the sake of telling the story. And I am more into, I need to integrate. I need to belong in order to survive. And even coming here, I need to integrate some of the Canadian values, because that's what is needed right now. And what is happening in the last couple of years has reawakened me, not just to the complacency, but to what I've forgotten. And I think this new generation is just bringing it to the forefront, going, like you said, unapologetically, stop forgetting. Remember, it's always been there. You just forgot. Awaken, wake up, wake up. And I'm really enjoying that. And that's where we have a little bit of that conflict. And he says, making Arab cool again, identity cool again. And I said, it's always been cool. But it's always been. It's just
it has. And, pushing it forcibly is not cool.
No.
So, yes, whilst I agree with showcasing talent and how important it is in terms of this word that everyone, or phrase that everyone uses, soft power, I don't like how, and it's interesting. So I was on the advisory board of FTA, which is a prize over here. And a very well-known editor-in-chief of a magazine, very cool magazine in the UK, he was saying, well, about one of the designers, I don't understand where their culture is in this. I said, I don't understand your question in that, because just because we are from the region. So are you trying to tell me a Scotsman always has to have tartan? I said, we are global in terms of our knowledge and influence. Particularly in the Arab world, we've always travelled. We've always loved to learn from other cultures and share our culture, whether it be through food, whatever it might be, music. So I just...
It has always been a culture of exchange.
But I just find it, there was one designer in particular over here, and she used to create these really fun suits, and then all of a sudden one season I saw her like in all the June colours and flowy. I was like, where are you?
Right.
She was like, I was told I need to show more of my cultural identity.
Okay.
I said, your cultural identity is you. You're a global citizen.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So yes and no. I think a lot of the actually Lebanese creatives do it very well.
Yeah.
They're unapologetic about their design and where it comes from, and their storytelling.
The multi-layers that comes with. And I love the wisdom of that, so that we're not stuck in a box of the obvious when art and culture is very much the nuances actually showing their faces. That's what makes it so rich and special.
Absolutely. And it could be from a book you read, it could be from an image you've seen, or it could be... It's always relatable.
It's any experience that you go through.
Yeah.
And what impact it has on you, or how it makes you, I don't want to say react, but engage with the surrounding. This is what helps in moving things forward. I mean, you mentioned that these are lovely anecdotes. Do you consider these as setbacks, or through the journey that you start? When you came here, you took the helm of the fashion council, and you had these kind of interactions, these kind of reactions. Were these setbacks, or were these like motivators to move forward with your thoughts?
No, it's just I like observation. So I love, I guess, human nature and changing perceptions. I used to travel a lot with my previous work, with some very high profile, meeting some crazy people through that experience. And I would see people talk about our culture, or, I'm Muslim, so about my religion. I would allow them. Something I learned in Islam was you never raise your voice or get into debate. Half the time, if you get into debate, there's no point. You're trying to get into debate with someone who doesn't want to learn. So, I would allow these people to talk, and then I'd say, I'm Arab, do you know I'm Muslim? So how do you perceive me then?
Yeah.
I said, so I liked breaking down. So I don't come into something, I'm Arab, I'm Muslim, I'm a woman, whatever the situation might be. I am much more gentle in
I am who
my
I am.
approach. Yeah.
And then, whatever comes along that is just an add-on.
By the way, so that breaks down, I think, being comfortable in yourself and breaks down perceptions.
I want to bring it back to the industry of fashion, right? Where trends move fast, as we know. I mean, you just gave the example of the person who was so effervescent, and then suddenly her designs turned into more kind of earthly like colors. But it's the industry moved very fast, and it's often very difficult to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to that. With Dubai trying to establish itself as a hub for creators, what do you perceive to be the biggest, opportunity? Because I don't want to say what could be the big hurdle. Yeah. What is the biggest opportunity for Dubai and for creators in Dubai?
I just think Dubai needs to own it. And when I say Dubai, I mean the creative industries.
They don't at the moment?
They do, but I think it's always about fitting in. It's always about being, for example, here's a clear example, the fashion weeks. Yeah, we want to be one of the top. Why? Why can't we create something new? Dubai was built on customer experience, which everywhere else is lacking.
Right.
It was built on retail and consumers and understanding the people that are buying. So why don't we reflect that and be something completely different and fresh and new? And, I think it's about being inclusive rather than exclusive, and giving the creatives that opportunity to sell directly to customer. That's what platforms should be about, not just industry.
Yeah.
What does, unless you're one of the big designers, what does an industry event really mean for that designer?
Yeah. I mean, PR highlights and opportunities.
PR, and then it goes down.
It goes down until the next highlight.
But that's not going to be the survival of a brand.
So what is the language you're using? Because it feels to me you have a great role and, in a way, responsibility, but it's more in line with what you said at the beginning, coming to dissolve those stereotypes gently, not jarringly, not in a jolting way, which is my way. But
no.
But how are you approaching that, knowing that you can see the potential right there? You see it in the bigger picture. What are you bringing in? How are you approaching that to get them over that?
Listen, everyone has their own journey. I can only have an opinion. It's now within the hands of this next generation. the way I do it is through mentorship. So this is why I accepted being the chairman of Harriet Watt Dubai, because I feel that's my only way of forming change. And you know, I do mentor people outside of the region and also within the region independently. It did become overwhelming at some point because people's perception anyway of mentors is very different to how it should be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we talked about that actually with Faisal and Malak, and there's this perception of mentor being the teacher passing on knowledge. I often looked at a mentor being a mentee as well through that exchange. And through the questions that a mentor receives from their mentee, they become mentees themselves. And that's not often understood as such. It's that the definition of mentor-mentee has always been like teacher, student, expert, apprentice. Whereas I see it as a much more, interactive relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We should learn. There's an institution I'm working with at the moment, we're talking about the community. And even with Dubai Culture, they've sat me down in amongst other industry peers. And, it's great that you have the big names, and it's great that we always seem to focus on those emerging talent. But actually, the real gold is that mid-level.
True.
The talents, I mean, it could be architecture businesses, it could be, graphic design, but they're the ones that interplay with both layers. And they're the ones that will offer guidance and also feed from that sort of emerging talent. There's such an importance in that sort of middle level that actually that's the level we should be really focusing on and supporting, because they're the real mentors, and they will bring up those mentees.
Exactly.
And they will also learn. I think, I would like us to focus more on that kind of
so
middle
it's like
level
collaborative.
as well.
It's like a really, because you started with something and I got curious about it. You said if mentorship were done, because it's understood differently here, and I felt like there was more of a, let's say, a little of a critique, and you're saying there's a need for more of a collaborative, less hierarchical way of looking at it.
Yeah, and also, as a mentee, you're not meant to be doing their work.
That's right.
That's not how you learn.
Right. Yeah.
And I just feel, people's expectations of what a mentor is going to give you is unrealistic.
Is misplaced in some cases. But what we seem to be talking about, where the region is heading and what roles can be played to shape that moving forward. And I have a question. We have a section in our show where we call upon friends to send us questions to ask you. So we have a question, one of many coming up. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask it now.
Hi, Nez. It's Sue Holt. And my question is, where do you think the creative industry in the Middle East is going to be in the next 5 years? And what do you think is going to either help it or stop it from getting there?
Oh, thanks a lot, Sue. That's quite a big question. That deserves its own show.
Its own show, exactly. But we can always count on Sue to ask us the questions, right?
I love Sue. I mean, just to talk about Sue just for 1 second, she's a real advocate, even amongst peers. She's always supportive. So, Sue, that is a big question. But I think... actually, for the region, I think it's stability. I think it's about offering those that don't have the stability a platform and the more stable environments. So like the UAE, Saudi, I think they have a big role to play, mainly because of the support, of the attention they get. I mean, if we look at Lebanon, they're always having to rebuild themselves. So where do they have this platform? There's some exceptional like talent in Lebanon. Like just going with We Design, Marianne and Samir created something that I was completely blown away from. So I think there's a role to play for these more stable countries. And I don't think we should necessarily define ourselves in such a nationalistic way.
Within boundaries of a country.
Yeah, I mean, I see myself as an Arab. I don't necessarily see myself as a Libyan.
Yeah.
I say that because I never got the chance to grow up in Libya or be around my family. So, it's
and there's a fusion going on at the moment, isn't there, on the regional level as well? Like we're appreciating the likes of Saint Levant, for example, we're talking about that is bringing so many different layers, and there is this lifting. For me, the feeling is that we're lifting each other up,
and that's what we were missing, quite honestly, before.
Yeah.
We always have a joke amongst Libyans that we avoid each other. I did avoid a friend that was married to a Libyan for like nearly a year, just because.
I think it's the case of Arabs living in Europe. We kind of in our quest to integrate, and I don't really necessarily like that word, but to belong, we kind of avoid each other, which is the wrong way of doing it, right?
I think it was fear as well. Because there was a lot of. We left Libya for a reason. So my father was, very outspoken. So we had to almost keep quiet.
Exactly.
But actually, funny enough, when I first came to move here, I found the community very dislocated. They didn't support each other.
Yeah.
It was it lacked competitiveness actually, but they were competitive with each other.
I see.
Which doesn't help any community grow.
And I want to go back to something you said about stability, because my first reaction when you were saying that, I was like, hold on for a minute. I mean, creators should strive in their own indigenous environments. Why should we, and I'm being very harsh in my interpretation, why should we uproot them and bring them into a stable place for them to be creators?
But how do we get into that?
But then, as you were talking about it, and as you mentioned the example of Saint Levant, it's like, no, actually it's not a matter of uprooting them, it's a matter of providing them the container for them to actually live their art and express themselves. So.
Be the catalyst for at the end of the day, they need to sell.
Yeah,
of course,
Yeah.
We can talk about not being commercial. I mean, a lot of artists love to say, I'm not commercial. There's a lot of integrity in this creative. There's a lot, but actually, unless you can afford to be like that, then
can't be sustainable.
You need to fund your passion somehow.
A lot of artists can't do that.
And this brings up, I want to play another question from another friend, because it touches upon, how we define success, right? So I'm going to play that other question, and I'm sure you'll recognize.
Hi, Naz. So you've had different careers, working in different industries in different countries. I wanted to know how all of that has shaped your understanding of success, and how has that understanding evolved through time?
For me, Faisal, thank you. Success is about self-satisfaction. I've never sought success for approval. I just want to do the best job I can. And I find it, funny when people go, oh, you do all sorts, you do. Actually, no, I don't. I do very specific things. I grow things, I build things. Particularly when I was in 19 Entertainment with Simon Fuller, he would throw all sorts of things at us, which I loved, because then you get, to the true word of entrepreneurship. He could say, go and build a team to build the latest, like, sports car that can beat, Mercedes or something. So, and you'd have to build it by next week. So that's what I see success is, that satisfaction of being able to create from beginning to end.
But there is a sense of fulfillment in doing that.
Absolutely.
Right? Almost like challenging yourself of, okay, how far can I take my ambition in a certain way?
When you use all aspects of your brain as well, I love being able, because to me, strategy is very creative. And also to make it commercial. So that left and right brain thing is something that I personally thrive on. And when I can use both, that's when I feel like, successful is maybe perhaps the wrong word, but that's what I get excited about.
Fulfillment or rewarding. Rewarding. Yeah. So what was the most rewarding moment or achievement? Or is there a single moment, rewarding moment?
I don't know about rewarding, but I love a challenge. So I think, so in my previous life with Simon, I was in charge of the Beckham brand. So at the time when we first had them, Victoria came back to Simon. She was still in that music with contract with Damon Dash and all of that crazy world. And she was one of the most hated people.
She didn't have a very
ticket. Yeah. I found it so saddening, because actually Victoria is one of the most thirsty people in terms of, she will get on the floor and scrub if it means, it will bring her to the next step. Yeah, she will sweat it out. So it was that spin and changing perceptions of their life. It's funny because lots of people came later and were like, oh yes, I was the success of it. No, you weren't. You were, a PR that came at the very end when we launched her own name brand. But it was all the layers that we had to do. It took 4 or 5 years. So, I am proud of that. I used to be shy to talk about that.
Why?
But I don't know. Maybe it's the Britishness in me.
What did it take for it to? What did you have to do for that? Because you keep saying changing perceptions. I'm catching on that.
I love a bit of spin. I think also because, if I was going to distill it and understand why I think the power of marketing is when I was younger, I was in this little village. I grew up in a little village, and I went from no one knowing where Libya was or being Libyan to my best friend that I grew up with. Her mother wouldn't let us into our home because there was that policewoman that was shot, and people,
the embassy.
All of a sudden, and then they're playing. And all these other things which are written down in history. And I became a terrorist, and that and having that voice, people imposing their perceptions of me, which is something that, I don't like someone imposing how they see me. So when people say, oh, you work on different things, or you're this, or you're that, or,
they're giving you an identity which is not yours.
This is where I really kick out.
I love how loving a challenge in something is about the challenge of changing a perception, and that's why you said marketing is a creative strategy, is creative, because it is about thinking it through of how do you shift it from this to this, and it is a mental exercise, it is a mental challenge, and I love how you're placing it in the creative world as well, but you're constantly changing perception. And actually my curiosity here is, what would be your success story if you were to go into the future for Dubai, in the role that you're in? What is the perception you'd want to, what would then be the success story for you then?
Well, actually, success for me would...
Or fulfillment.
Fulfillment would be to be able to work with the wider region, actually. That would be my...
That's a very inclusive approach, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think that also... Because that's another perception.
No, I was about to say, what's the perception you're trying to move from?
Well, because people very much think Mina, as is an old phrase that people use, they expect our behaviour and our culture to be all the same. And we are such an intricate tapestry of nuances that this would be my achievement, I think, of just breaking all of that down and making people realise, you know, a German is not the same as a French person.
Right.
A Syrian is not the same as a Kuwaiti. And, you know, how powerful women are in our culture, and how, when I say strong men are, I mean in the word of kindness.
Not in the kind of established perception of what, strong men should be. But I love that.
Which we're also waking up to as well.
I love that because it's a way of, and I know that I'm borrowing your term, it's a way of enhancing the sameness through the variety and the richness of that variety. Yes, the region is the region. We're all Arabs, but we're Arabs, with many Arabs within the same
mosaic of us,
region, and each has, its own identity and cultural richness. And I'm using cliche words here, but they are true, right? And each can express that differentiation in a way that makes us all the same and collectively be one nation.
And that's why craftsmanship, I think, that's why we have to really focus on the grassroots as well as the sort of shiny big things, because craftsmanship is something that we cannot lose. And really, if you want to hone down a country's culture, it is down to those people.
Yes, and can I just add something? I want to go back to you. He loves talking industry. I love the industry, but what I pick up is a bit of contradiction going on, and maybe that's why it's so interesting what you're doing in terms of perception. But you're saying, I'm an Arab before being Libyan, but here you are wanting to kind of bring to the forefront the Libyan, the Algerian, the Moroccan, the Lebanese, the all the way honing into the persona behind that, the character, which you spoke to right at the beginning, which is you bring in the honing in of even further. It sounds to me like a little bit of a
Don't get my double chin.
Oh, I did.
But that's the honing in. Literally honing in to the minutest of characters. But yeah, it's interesting because you're looking at craftsmanship, which is that country's honing into, that brings it to the forefront. But you're also saying, want Arab, and then you're saying the stability of the whole Arab world being brought here, but then you're going into the specifics. Is it a bit of a mix of both for you personally? You and you?
It's funny because I don't know where I'm going to start with that question. It's quite, again, a big question. You guys don't do easy ones. Just ask me what colour I like.
What colour do you like?
Again, I find that quite a complex question.
It is, actually.
So, I mean, me personally, I remember being interviewed by a psychologist who was writing a book about culture and people growing up like immigrants in other cultures. And I used to struggle a lot with identity. Not because I was ashamed in any way, but, you know, I was brought up, I felt very British. At the same time, I felt very Arab. And then I realized, you know, there's also this like Italian influence, Greek, Turkish influence from our family. And then, you know what? I decided to pick the best from all of them. Why shouldn't I? Why can't I be all of them? That obviously does not answer your question.
It does.
But does it?
Absolutely.
It does.
It does.
But, you know, why can't I be, you know, everything?
That's because you're curious.
I'm so curious, and I do love people.
So you connect.
I connect.
Yeah.
I love connecting. I just find people that are open and just who they are. This is where it's kind of jarring, I think, in the world of consumerism now, where it's all about you have to have that whatever piece, which I've talked about before, handbags, or you have to. That's not what defines you.
Right.
And actually, I'm not interested in you if you feel that's what defines you. You know, my friends actually are all really big characters when I think about it. And some would say they're, you know, difficult characters. But I know that these are the people, when you hone in on them, they have the hearts of gold. They're
They
the
do.
sort of, you know, the ones that you know will be there for you, whatever.
We've picked up another life hack, you know, connecting with others.
Yeah.
Every other person has a story to tell, and every other person has an interesting story to tell. So thank you for being curious, Naz, because we need more of that. We need more of that in our world. We were about to wrap up, but I have one more question that we usually ask towards the end of an episode. But thankfully, somebody else sent us that question.
Okay.
Yeah, that same question.
All right.
Yeah.
We get to hear it from someone.
And it's kind of links up to our discussions of, you know, mentorship, or discussions of teacher-student relationship, of, you know, what the region needs in terms of moving forward.
My question for Nez is, she is someone who has been a mentor to many young talents and creatives in the region. And I'm curious, what kind of advice or what suggestions would she give to a young Nez, the young Nez?
I'm curious too.
Yeah, I love that question.
I think it would be not to be so hard on myself.
And
You know,
were you?
Yeah, very, very introspective.
How does that look? What does that look like when you say I'm hard on myself?
I live two personas. I live the persona that never says no. You know, I've never said no professionally to anything because it's taken me around the world. And I've met the most amazing people and had the most expressive experiences because of that. But before that, you know, you have to like yourself, I think. And for whatever difficulties I went through childhood, I focused a lot on other people and supported other people, which is a theme that actually serviced me well within my career, being intuitive. But I needed to also be intuitive about myself and fulfill my needs, look after myself. And I think that would be the biggest lesson for me to learn, and still learning actually, particularly as a mother and a wife and a friend and a owner of many cats.
And how do you how many cats?
How many?
How do you do that? How do you keep looking after yourself first and kind of loving yourself first?
Just being interested in myself and learning about myself. So actually, you know, it's usually through some of the hardest things I've been through that I learn the most about myself. And actually, that journey post-childhood came from, you know, I never cried. I never showed emotion. I always felt like I had to be a tower of strength. But something happened to me that was quite a violent thing on my own in London, where I was actually attacked by 2 men at knife point.
Wow.
And I fought my way. Anyway, that was the situation. But of course, I wanted to be strong and I wanted to be, I didn't tell anyone. I didn't until my mother found the police note. But of course, I then suffered from post-traumatic stress. And that was my journey to self-understanding. And then I started, you know, reading books about trauma and, you know, Gabor Mate and, you know, seeking support. I you know, understanding that you do need help. Help is accepting help. Exactly. Accepting
so turning
help
the stuff that you're doing for the world onto yourself, whether it's curiosity
and what
or
I was doing as a child.
Beautiful.
Well, Naz, thank you very much for accepting that at that point, because this is what brought us to the Naz of today, right? And having the opportunity of talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for changing perceptions, and thank you for the nuances that come along with that, because we need nuances because the world is complex. And thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's up to all of us, I think.
We all play a role in that. But thanks for sharing your lived experiences.
Thank you so much, both of you.
This has been Forward Moves, hosted by Raj Haddad and Lina Nahhas, where we had a fascinating conversation with Nez Gebreel. Thanks again.
Thank you.
We are recording at the Poster Studio in Dubai. Our producer today is Abood. If you like our show, share it with your friends, write us 5 stars, and till then, keep moving forward.